Kia ora, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm sitting here with my friend
Bridget Watson from Trusting Vulnerability.
and we hope that you enjoy this episode. I knew it. As soon as we walked in, this is one of those things where you meet someone, they start talking, and you're like, I wish we had the gear set up already, because everything we were talking about, it was just like analogy after analogy, and I was like, that's so good, I hope we can capture that.
And then an excited laugh.
Yeah, and then excited laugh, and then like the pacing back and forth, like how are we going to get this, but I think it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, I'm pretty happy to be here. I feel so grounded and excited.
Oh, that's
it's
awesome.
a weird feeling.
Well, the excitement is, I guess, because we get to talk about something that you've been a part of and that you're extremely passionate about. I'm passionate to hear more about it, but I'm also passionate to like provide platforms for people to explore it a little bit more, to share it with a lot of people, and then hopefully we can, all. I think something that you've said once is being able to have other people pay it forward with stuff that you've been doing, so that more people are exposed to practices that you find valuable.
Yeah, it's almost giving them permission. It's like an act of generosity, I think, sharing more of yourself so others can share more of themselves.
Absolutely, and that's where we'll probably take it at some point. But firstly, just to be able to put yourself out there and use a word like vulnerability, and that kind of comes down to a point of you being able to accept who you are, or starting to get to know who you are and being more comfortable with who you are. But in terms of identity, like that's a shifting thing all the time. But you have your foundations, and those foundations of who you are. How would you say where you're from, or all those different things for just the basics of who you would explain yourself as?
I think, as you just said, it changes so much, and it's been an interesting journey for me, because I used to would have just said where I've most recently lived or whatever, and now I think even particularly for me with identity stuff, a lot recently has been about reconnecting to my whakapapa, and now I'll mention more my Māori side a lot, but then also now I talk about things quite abstractly, and I talk about things that I value, where I'm from in terms of creativity, connection, all of that stuff. So I still get pretty confused, and that's the thing with identity for me is I often, that whole thing is you're whole, complete, and unfinished yet. I get really confused, identity-wise who I am at some points, but I always get grounded in what I'm here for, and that's the values stuff. So I'm on my journey with that. That's
awesome, because that foundation that you have, you always have the similarities across all of the different practices that you have, depending on the context, but at the same time, you're growing and you learn new things and you're exposed to other things, and then that's oh wow, I didn't know that, so now that's why I've evolved in that way. So as long as you're open to it, I guess.
Someone said to me recently, one vision, many missions. And I was like, that's cool. Because for me, I know constantly I'm almost shedding identities, unlearning things that help me live into that vision, but the missions are what get me there. That's so cool. And that's kind of it's not kind of one of the analogies that was the first one that everyone really took away from this was I talk about cicadas and how I love cicadas. They remind me of when I was a kid. Lunchtime, sitting down, cicadas.
And it was that was a noise that you always heard, but also the skins that they would shed out of, because that was that's what they do. They grow too big for it, and that's because they have to move into a different environment that fits that new version of themselves.
I heard they're underground for ages or something, then they only pop out for a day and shed that skin one time. Is that right? Someone gave me a fun fact about cicadas once, and but I feel that they shed it, and then you sometimes, as soon as you shed an identity too, there's that weird phase of limbo, or you're in that abyss of uncertainty of okay, what am I now? But it's how you feel now is the big thing.
And being able to identify those things, which I think is something that you've been a big advocate for, but also just making sure that people are okay with that shift and okay with taking it all in. But, part of that evolving process is going into different professions, because we think that professions define who you are. But you've studied, actually, I'll let you go through that. So when you started studying, what was the whole mission behind going to university?
Well, I remember when I was, going through school and doing NSA and everything, and then doing a lot of sports at school. I went to a career advisor, and we talked about a lot of things. I remember initially they said do business or something. It was more of that case of what I don't want. I felt it immediately in my gut, and I'm a very intuitive person. I was like, cool, so that's not what I want. And then we re-talked over some things, and they highlighted physio, and I thought I shouldn't go into physio. I thought there was no jobs, or I thought all these things about physio, and as soon as I took them away, I realised, wow, that's really me. And so I picked physio with that combination of sort of interests at the time, sports and stuff, but values of connecting with people. And it was boom, okay, we're in it, Bridge.
And the connection part, has that always been something as part of you, like even go through high school or even before high school?
Yeah, I have 3 siblings,
There we
and
go.
my family and I are very close, and connection's probably one of the biggest values, I think, in our family. So ever since I can remember, like, having some laughs around the family table, all those sorts of, bigger conversations is always what grounds me. So connection's been massive since I was a kid, and particularly, through physical activity and sport growing up was where I indirectly got a heap of that connection. And
Sure.
I can only piece the dots together now, but that's really, I got a lot of foundations of what connection can feel like for me and what it can create and who I get to be within that. So from way back when.
That's cool. And I mean, sometimes it is reflection that makes you see those sorts of things because they don't make sense to you at the time. But then you're like, oh, wow, they all built me to who I am now, or this has always been part of me. When you were going through your practice, though, like, what was the kind of outcome? So you get into physio and then you're thinking, like, I want to connect with people, I want to help through physical activity. But did you have, like, an idea of some sort of job you'd go into?
When I was going through university, my biggest goal at that point was being the Paralympic physio for New Zealand.
Right.
I went through a big phase there, and I remember particularly through university, I was involved in this leadership award where I did volunteer hours, and I remember I helped out at some of the physically disabled and mentally disabled events here and did mentoring through that, and I had such a connection to being able to create opportunity for everyone and to experience that sense of connection that perhaps mightn't have got opportunity. And I think, being a part of Paralympics was a big thing for me, and then I realised there was another whole level of what was driving that, and it was just like giving that opportunity to anyone wanting it. So I kind of just fell into musculoskeletal physio first out of that, and then I was more curious where it would take me. I didn't actually have this decided endpoint, and that can feel quite uncertain as well. But
the uncertainty, so kind of having that idea of, you know, what you want to do and what's going to make you feel like it's the right thing to do. Did you find that like it kind of relaxed your uncertainty a little bit, or is it still just as uncertain as anything else would be?
I think it's my tolerance for uncertainty was pretty low.
Okay.
But throughout uni, one thing I really liked about physio that gave me a lot of guidance. They picked all of our papers for us, and the stuff we got to do, and we did so much interactive stuff. It was all so fun, and something that drives me, within a lot of my mahi even now is like, how can I feel more alive doing it, and connect with friends and stuff doing it. So that gave me a sense of more certainty. But after it was like, oh God, what job to go to first? I remember that was a big phase, wowee.
So we'll just go back to, so there was a few things you talked about, the leadership program that you were doing through the university and the volunteering stuff. Is that something that there's like, it's made aware to a lot of people, or was that something that you went and you sought that?
Interestingly, all through school, I remember I had been encouraged to sort of take part. I did the Duke of Edinburgh Award, did that, and then going to uni, I realised really quickly the sort of opportunity or exposure to leadership opportunities was quite low for me at that point. Well, I didn't know because I was so tied up in health science.
Absolutely.
And then my brother had said at the time, like, do something good for your CV.
Right.
So at that point I looked around what I could do, and I saw this leadership thing, and I was like, oh my God, amazing. And little did I know there was like a lot more than a CV tick than 2 years. And I remember finishing that and realising that growth within that space was fully what created what university was for me. And then particularly around volunteering, but more so being able to learn how to prioritise my time to values aligned action, always doing that stuff made me feel so much more me than just going out and drinking the whole time. So over the first, second, third years, I definitely got a bit more of a tact and perhaps perspective on what contribution looks like for me, and I'm still finding that, definitely, even going forward, that's the big thing. But I think the underlying thing was doing the leadership award was what connected me more to myself, and that made me be able to actually share more from an authentic space as well. And help people from an authentic space.
And it's part of that, and being able to deal with more people, because that's what I really liked about seeing more of the clinical placement type degrees, is that people are dealing with people, which is something that a lot of us do, is we go and deal with people. But where I find in the university space, or actually most learning spaces, where it's very theoretical and the application is sometimes missed. When you actually went into your clinical placements, what were, think back to some of those reflections you probably did, what did you find were your just strengths that you already had, but what were also the parts where you like, oh, maybe I could get a little bit better at that?
Yeah, immediately what pops up. I remember within the physio school, firstly, they're incredible for providing like a variety of placements. And I had one where I was with a woman with a long-term like chronic condition, and she had gone through a lot of different exercises, and she had been helping out with the physio school for a long time where students interact. And I had this one moment where she was kind of bored of exercise, and I got to create all of these random exercises and like a combo of these exercises, and I called it the donkey kick combo.
Oh,
and she'd like go onto the ground, like do these like glute exercises, stand up and do these things. It was all about balance where she was in her job, I think, some sort of job, and it was like applicable to her life rather than just what I think she should do.
Absolutely.
And it was that thing of like creativity got to be co-creation with us, that was really special.
Yeah. I think that's the fun thing with most things. When you like actually understand the core principles of it all, you can start to add those elements that then apply to their life, and something that they would actually take away is like, this is something that I can sustain over a long period of time. That's so cool. And the change that you make, even though it was like one person, like some people go out and they deal with whole teams and stuff, and you're like, I'm making this team better, but just seeing that change in one person like can give you so much power.
And who I got to become in that process of realizing, like, when I actually just bring my creativity to the table rather than just trying to regurgitate information, you get to integrate, like, bringing your humanness to it. And that was the exact same as what I remember a situation where I thought I wasn't doing so well. I was in placement in hospital, and I remember tapping so much into what is the right thing to do right now by like all the rules and all the different things I learned, and I actually removed like what would the bridge humanist person do right now, and use that kind of intuition to help my judgment. And that was a moment where I was like, I got to do some work here of like, how do I fully bring me to this work and integrate all that I've learnt, because so quickly I got very black and white into what I need to know rather than what's the bigger picture. And that was I remember that was a big moment of like, I'm not my smart when I just try and follow like things that I've learned. It's like about bringing yourself to it.
And during that process, because like it's when you're going through undergrad, like you feel like that's how you have to do it because you're following the rules because you want to pass, like ultimately. But what did you feel that most of the barriers for you, like thinking about bringing your own self to all of this, was it more like an internal thing, or did you feel like it was the structures that you were part of? Probably a bit of both, but
I think 100% internal.
Well,
like now that I'd look at it, like taking that radical responsibility of like, I think you don't know what you don't know. And I had a whole a lot of mindset blocks in the way of bringing myself to it that like there was probably the opportunity to bring it, but I didn't kind of realize how, or I didn't know how to hold the space for myself as to how. And I think like particularly in communicating with patients, I know that was a big thing for me. So often I used to avoid actually kind of constructive feedback to a patient. Like, we all know often people don't do physio exercises. I've been one of them. But I really struggled to be able to communicate to patients like, this isn't happening. Why not? And like dig a bit deeper on that. Like, I really struggled with those more confrontational or like, creative actual blind spot conversations. And I think that was a thing. And my responsibility. I'm taking that one for that one.
That's awesome.
I think structures set you free is a cool like motto I do have. Like I really like the foundation that you get taught through undergrad and even when you're first learning those first couple of years, and it actually takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of other people holding space for you to be able to then bring your more like perhaps feminine energy into the structures. Yeah,
that's cool. That is really, really cool, actually. That's an awesome reflection. And I think as part of that as well, when you do highlight any responsibility that you could have, it just does remind you that you have so many capabilities. Like you're actually everyone's such cool people, and that when we realize or trust within ourselves that we can bring that sort of thing, that's when we know like, okay, we can make a difference for these people, because whatever they were doing before may not have been working, but this then is like when we can start to look at it and start to modify a few things because we have that skill.
And like when you start with yourself and then try and enable that for the patient. Like for example, I was in a cool ass conversation with someone the other day, how like when you start to speak from the capacity conversation rather than just your capability, that's when you get to grow. Because I think often from learning in the structured way, I was kind of measure my value or whatever as a physio, as a student, by my capabilities, and I forgot that your capabilities only show when you have capacity. And like when I started to do work, like even in the last year, a lot of self-development stuff that you actually look at where your blind spots are so that your capacity can increase, all of a sudden your capability is flying. And I think from me having realised that, then being able to be that for patients would have been really, really beneficial for me. But I was talking to them from that kind of capability lens, like, you're not doing your exercises, why? And I'm not looking at like, but what else is in that bigger picture, that more sort of holder?
Because there's a wide realm. Like, if you only look at what you can do at that time, that's what you can do at that time. But if you're thinking about where you could like progress into, then you start taking opportunities that you know, like, this will actually help me get to that point, rather than just being quite fixed-minded as like, this is all I can do. That's awesome.
That's
really, really cool.
Capacity is everything. And I think I've only like started being able to communicate my capacity more recently, and all of a sudden my capabilities growing. You know, I think a lot of it is in language, actually, you know, being able to speak to that rather than just think it through as well. A lot of the stuff that I was like, you know, find difficulty, but I'd just keep in my head, not be like, this my capacity is short. And I think, you know, when I was that, and like that's a mirror for the patient to be that too, but if I was that clearing, I think they get to be the permission, you know, to be more themselves too. And I wonder if that would have, you know, opened up.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, because it's quite an intimate relationship that you end up having with these people. Like, they actually come to you vulnerable because there's something that's gone wrong, or something that is limiting them from being able to, you know, explore the rest of their life and all these other things. Or there's something that's like a fundamental limiter of some sort of activity. So they're coming to you with like, oh my gosh, this isn't working for me. And so like you share that bond already. But it's like, how much are you willing to give for them to like give you the other side of the picture as well?
It's how much you're kind of willing to be vulnerable back. Like that's very generous of people to show up and say, you know, I've got these things. And I think, it's an art of vulnerability, I think. And it's really hard, I suppose. That's the thing that comes up for me, like being personable and being professional as well. I think very quickly, like, and as you said, as a new grad, you've got all those rules and you get so in that professional thing that sometimes that, like for me, that definitely blinded me from like personable. And it's interesting finding that balance. And I think that is a matter of time and being able to talk about it.
For sure. And setting up some sort of either accountability to yourself or to a mentor as well. Like, that was something that I felt I was not too good for, but I just felt like if I have a mentor that I like, am I a burden to them because I have all these, like, you take on so many responsibilities and you feel like you have to take it on yourself because it's like, oh, everyone must have gone through this. But that's something that we get out of as well. When you finished your study, did you go, like, how long were you a practitioner before starting to explore all of this stuff?
Bang on 2 years.
Bang on 2 years, okay.
It was 2 years in a private practice, which I had joined that private practice because they were like very values aligned and values driven with all of their business, and they were incredible to work for. And then I remember I did a self-development course and got really aligned with kind of my bigger mission of empowering those, you know, harder conversations and how to be vulnerable. And I think because I realized in my role, I wasn't showing up at that. So then how could, I expect me to even grow within that role? So I was like, let's hammer this home and let's share this story. And trusting vulnerability sort of became. And then so being able to come up with a name, was that something, because like I find origin stories of different things like so cool when you're like, because some people were like very meticulous about it, like that this is what it's going to be, this is how it's going to look, and some people just like literally have it in like a dream, or they're just walking one day, they're in a shower and then it comes to you. What type of vibe did you have around that? This is funny. I remember particularly trying to make a logo. Now that was the funniest part. Like, I'm Bridge, and I was like really trying to be like punny and like draw a bridge, like bridging vulnerability or something, and all this stuff. And like, I'm really glad we didn't follow through with that. But the name Trusting Vulnerability, I was obsessed with Brené Brown. Like, vulnerability was everything, and I figured that vulnerability needs to be a part of it because that's the emotion, one, I was learning the most about, and two, I realised was just not even being able to be talked about at dinner tables and stuff. I was like, imagine if that was much of a buzzword as like fish and chips in New Zealand, you know? And so I was like, vulnerability needs to be there. And I was like, but what is it about vulnerability? And it's like, well, I got to trust it. And then all of a sudden, trusting vulnerability.
That's really cool.
And because I think it's not just about what vulnerability is, it's about the act of the process of trusting it and showing up as your best self in that, rather than just the outcome, because you never know the outcome. And I think had to have a verb element to it because it's a process, not a product. And
absolutely. And if we look at most things as the process, we can actually start to see like the most of ourselves in that, because what we see at the end, what everyone sees at the end is like, okay, that's what ended up happening, but the like 90% of everything happens during that entire process. Like not just the actual you doing stuff, but it's like the metaphysical change that goes through you as well. So that's awesome.
I've definitely become a whole lot more about like energy and all of that stuff in the last year, because I think going through a lot of growth, you do become a whole lot more aware
Yep.
of all your shifts as well. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And so this is a question more selfishly for myself.
Fantastic.
Because
Someone said the other day, actually, reframing selfish to self-full. And I was like, that is so cool.
Nice.
Because you know how we like glorify being selfless? And then selfish is kind of the bad person.
Yeah.
Self-full.
Yeah.
That's a vibe for me at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's good. So I'm being self-full here. And I'm just, like, when you start something, especially something where you're putting yourself out there, especially for what is happening a lot when we think about Tall Poppy, we think about just but your friends, and when you would do a presentation for them in front of class, like that you just mock each other, right?
Yeah.
Now you're coming out there and your first port of call for what you're going to be doing is that this is me and I'm going through this and I want to share it with everyone.
Yeah.
How many questions to yourself did you feel like you had to have? Like, how many conversations did you have with yourself with yourself?
I think I feel it.
To be like,
yeah,
this is the right thing to do, or should I even do this? Am I the right person to do it?
Yeah. I think starting my business was probably the biggest decision I've ever made following my gut. And that was the biggest reassuring thing, because I think diving into it, I had all of those doubts that would come up, and if I'm all up in my head, like, no good, you know. And then whenever I kind of drop more into my body and feel my gut that this is the right thing to be doing, all of a sudden those answers would come up. And particularly it was always from parents, different people's parents, like, so what are you doing now, Bridge? You know, and it was those conversations were the hardest. And I often had those doubting thoughts, but as soon as I could kind of center and be present with, you know, what I'm doing, I always knew that you can then connect the dots looking backward but never forward. Like I think Steve Jobs said that one time, and I stuck with that. And it's more been, I think, starting, it all felt like the hype and really exciting and confusion, and then went through a weird phase of like, who am I to speak up about this? That's a really interesting phase to go, and I go through that with every, I think, evolution of growth is like, why me? It's like that Tall Poppy thing, it comes up so fast, and the thing I kind of clutch now is I always know just on the other side of that question of who am I to speak up about this, I get this massive insight, so it's almost a cool thing now when that comes up and I have a positive relationship of like feeling that vulnerability. I'm like, oh, this is familiar now. Like I've just got a lot more familiar, I think, with that vulnerability. So I don't treat it as a threat as much, but it's that social approval that got to me pretty quickly. Like I remember I was starting like on Instagram and everything, and I'm like, I'm Bridge from Trusting Vulnerability. Like, what does that even mean? And particularly when I was going through so much growth, I, a lot of the time, didn't know what it meant logically, and instead I just knew what values and my kaupapa behind it, and that's what kept me grounded, and being able to communicate that part. But I always said to people, I know why I'm doing it, but I don't really know what I'm doing yet. And that really helped. And then the thing of why not as well.
Yeah, well, because the tikanga and like the kaupapa that you have, that's like the tikanga follows to make sure so everything that's done after that point is to make sure, like, does it align with your kaupapa? For the people or for whoever it is you want to benefit, would this actually properly align and benefit them? Then if it is, the tikanga and like how you end up going about things will probably end up being the right way. And if you go from that sort of like values driven sort of way, people start like understanding you completely, and if you are going off slightly, instead of like critiquing you, they come at you with like, we want to support you.
Curiosity.
Like, this is more to like, I want to understand it a little bit more so that we can get on board and help direct you as well. So
and I think it takes courage to hold that space open to allow people to want to contribute. I definitely went through phases naturally of like trying to do it alone in fear that if I looked like I needed people, that was my weakness or whatever. And only, you know, probably in the last 6 months of business, being able to allow that space for people to come in and hold me in it, and not like necessarily just be giving advice, but like holding me in my best version. That's when the real creative stuff's come out as well. So it's a practice of holding space for yourself, I think, starting the new business stuff. And only the best can come from that. And the best friendships as well, like the support from people, and being able to I think spend so much more time starting my day off with why I'm doing it, not just what I'm doing. And like I'm a whole lot more present these days.
I was genuinely just about like, I was actually just going to ask, what is something that you do daily to remind yourself of everything and like to keep your mind on that? So when you are asking those things, like, is there a particular process you go through, or is it just reminders to yourself when you feel something come up?
I think if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, it would have been quite different. Like, perhaps 6 months ago, what I would be doing is I was doing a heap of self-development courses, and I had all these modules and all of that for the questions to ask yourself, so that you're not just critiquing yourself. That sort of stuff I was doing, but me and my flatmate, like early on last year, we started meditating like every day together, because we'd always try and do it alone, we'd never do it, so we were like accountability. And we did that, and we did 15 minutes every morning, and having that practice was massive for me in grounding, like, to the core before the day happens, which was cool. And then I also started this practice of acknowledgement, where I tried to do gratitude journaling, and I like couldn't connect with it, so I started doing it for people. So what I'd do is I'd write 10 things down about someone I value on my diary in my little cafe in the morning, and then I'd write it down and send it to them. That's probably the most vulnerable thing I feel like I've ever done, even though it was like a celebration. Like, I don't know, I used to hold vulnerability as like all sad emotions or whatever. Very much changed since then, but joy is the most vulnerable emotion. Like Brené Brown talks about that, and doing those acknowledgements every day, sending that message was so scary. And then it was like unfamiliar, but I'd keep doing it every day, so it became familiar and vulnerable. So that was a beautiful feeling. And then, I think I've done a good few hundred people now. I didn't even know I had more than 10 friends, but I'd like send these messages, and I started to realise that the power in that sort of communication and sharing what you value in people. Like over 60% of them probably like just reply being like, no one's ever said that, like, thank you. And that was a really cool act of, I suppose, being able to contribute to others without trying to give them anything. It's like sharing yourself and letting people in. And I think it's letting people in by showing how much they already offer you value is real powerful, rather than like something that they can necessarily do for you. It's like acknowledging them being them has been enough, and that's a cool feeling people to sit with. Some people find it hard to sit with that they're valuable just doing that.
That's fantastic. I mean, when there's verses in scripture and everything, and one that my friend, he always reminds me of, where he's just like, you are given light to help others shine their light. And that's that sort of thing. But also, like, when you see that sort of cog tick in other people's heads, where they start realizing for themselves the power that gives them, but like, it's not even empowerment, it's more just uplifting, because they were already empowered. Like, they have the power, they just need the tools or some sort of mode to be able to realize it, and then
or they kind of need you as a mirror, so they get to see it. And I think when you are that mirror for them,
that's a cool one as well. The mirror,
just hold up the mirror. It's not so hard,
but like the real mirror, like what everyone else sees as well, with like, that's so cool. I think. And something I came about really quickly, like, I think the reason I realised acknowledgements every day felt so vulnerable was because when I learnt that whatever you can see in anyone else, like the value you can see in anyone else, that's what you know deep down is in you. And that is confronting, because all of a sudden I was acknowledging all these epic things about other humans, and I was like, oh shit, maybe that means like I have these traits and I have these values, and that was confronting, and also like a really great way to start my day and ground me in, I'm doing this, with others and for others, not just for myself. I think it did always add that zoom out. This is, unity as people rather than just me on this lonesome journey. And because of that, that was the next question I was going to kind of go into, was more like protecting your own energy, because like it is easy to give a lot of yourself when you're trying to start something new, and when you do feel like you have to go by yourself because no one else it's not that no one else understands it, but that you feel like no one else would want to be part of it, or there's just so many different things in your mind where you're just like, I don't want to burden, I'll just keep going and going, and then you get to a point where you're doing so much for other people, it's easy to start feeling like, oh man, I lost myself in this and all of this. So for you, checks and balances for your own energy, what would that be? I think like now the biggest thing I do particularly is like things that will take my focus on one thing. I started doing a heap of drawing. Cool. Heap of drawing and a heap of chess. And then particularly like in terms of actually thinking about my energy these days, I do a lot more meditation. And have definitely been on more of a spiritual journey, I suppose, but in real time with people, I will always be thinking, how does my gut feel right now? Like I will be checking in with my intuition, not as like intuition for the big life moves. Like, I mean, when I went to India one time, it was like gut decision. Now, like my gut decisions all day, every day, and like you get the access to it. So the things that ground me and protect my energy is definitely like checking in with, do I feel like actually aligned to be here right now? And then if I don't, now I've kind of created myself that capacity to communicate to someone when I'm not available for something. I never used to know how to say no. And then someone said to me recently, like, no is a full sentence, and I'm like, boom. That's true.
And now I'm getting to embody that, and I think protecting my energy has become a massive priority of mine, and also one of the more confronting journeys, I think, because particularly even like friends that you've been friends with along the way, or hobbies that you've been doing that you've kind of got all tied to your identity. As soon as you decide that you don't want to do them to protect your own energy, you get all the things coming up, like that kind of separateness of like, I've changed, or like, you know, I'm not relatable, or like, I'm boring. That one always came up, like fun sponge, like with things, because I think a lot of the things that actually recharge my batteries are, you know, being alone or being focused on one thing. And I'm so outwardly an extrovert that I forget, and I trick myself that I don't need any time just for me and recharging. And I think, I think as my spiritual development has come on a long way, I think that's when I've become a lot more just like in me as well. And that's, because I now honour that as well. I don't think like spirituality is woo-woo for me. It's something that I'm like, cool, I'll happily be in amongst a group of friends now and be like, I'm going to do just meditation, whatever. I'm like, it's cool. My door will be open.
That's cool. So there's, the first one was meditation, because that's something that I've been a part of. I've tried to advocate it to a lot of people for a long time. And I usually get the same things back, like people saying to me, my mind races too fast and I can't, and I'm like, exactly. So like, I try and like, you're just proving the point. But when you started meditating, you know, did you find that you had the same circulating, ruminating thoughts in your mind, or did you find that it would change day to day? Because I usually had like themes of things that would come into my head every time. And the longer it would go, like it actually, I got better at seeing what it was, giving it attention, patting it, and then like letting it go. Did you have
patting it?
Yeah, I just be like, I see you, I see you, I care, I'll be there later. And then,
and I think it's like part of that, like, you're still a part of me. That I'm just not going to attach to that. It was a big attachment thing. When I started meditation, it was in first year uni, and I was real stressed with like health sci. I think it was first semester, and I looked up, like, I was doing yoga at the time. I was really into yoga, and then it popped up on YouTube, a 30-day meditation challenge, and I did that, and that was just fun. It was kind of just mind blowing. Like after a couple of weeks of like, I just felt different, and I was like, oh. But she guided you through a heap of things, because I think at that point I wouldn't have had the tolerance of being able to just sit in silence, and I would have just shame spiraled myself into like, oh yeah, my mind goes too fast for this, because I think that's an identity thing, right? I'm too busy for this, you know. And so she, that guided me. And then doing my own stuff, it was always have to come back to my breath. That's what helped me with meditation. Then the thoughts that would come up were more about like, whoa, is nothing in my mind? It would be that thing. It wasn't almost like there was so many thoughts. It was there was nothing. And I think, though, what I then realised is I'm the queen of suppressing emotions. And it was actually like this kind of suppression, or like, not being able to identify those thoughts, that was actually the issue there. So from meditating, etc., I remember I started to get like random memories that would come back, and that was like the kind of signs of not really suppressing stuff anymore. And that's what kept me hungry to keep doing it. Was like I'd get random cool memories of when I was young, and I was like, something's going right with this. And everyone has a different experience with meditation stuff, and that was mine. That felt really special, and my focus just went so much more crazy better at uni, and my creativity started to kind of give me glimmers, and I was like, I wasn't a creative person according to myself then, whereas now creativity and comms, that's my thing.
It sounds like the thing. And like that's creativity in a bunch of things, just like
self-expression.
But there were a few things that you said, like absolute gems, and just people, you know, tying to that identity of being busy, like and that's kind of, it's a really good way. And I find that I used to do it when something bad would happen, or I'd perceive something as bad, I would make myself busy so that I wouldn't have to face things. I'd just be like, if I'm busy, it'll just go away. So like, I'm too busy focused on here, so whatever's ruminating over there will just kind of forget about me and then go away.
And avoidance is tiring.
And then I'm just like, oh, what else? I've got too much free time. And I'm like, free time? You should be able to like go in and enjoy that free time. But then I took that away from myself because I didn't want to face all those different things. So the suppression is like, you think it's the best thing for you, because you're like, if I suppress it, I won't have to see it, I won't have to deal with it, and it'll just go away. But the longer you leave it, it's just like anything. You shake up a fizzy, and it's just like brewing.
It comes back like an unpaid debt.
Exactly. You're like, someone's knocking at your door, and then you're like, uh-oh, here it is.
Hello.
Wow.
Hello, old friend.
And that spiritual journey. So the meditation, the yoga, like when we talk about spiritual, it's frustrating, especially because this is where we are like, uniquely, or not even uniquely, we are intertwined with our spiritual beings because we are related to atua, and that's how we see the world. And when we talk about spirituality, it's more having that connection with everything. It's not just, oh, I'm going to meditate, light an incense, like, which is kind of perceived as spiritual.
which I definitely held it as that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So for you, that's what I was about to get to. So
Yeah.
the evolving and being a bit more in touch with that spirituality, what does it starting to look like now for you?
Yeah. I think it's definitely started to look like, particularly around language, like I will so openly talk about like being spiritual now, whatever that means to me. It's like, I was talking to my friend about this yesterday actually, like I speak with a lot more abstract, a lot more metaphors and everything. Like that's what, within communication, that's what spirituality looks like for me. And within my day-to-day stuff, it's this, such a more sense of presence. And I suppose honour for myself about my energy and being a lot more protective about my energy and so much more than just like physical body.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I like about it the most is that I really struggle to explain it. Yeah. So when I'm talking about spirituality, I get to be the most vulnerable. And when I feel most vulnerable, that's when I feel most alive. And so for me, spirituality is kind of being in that vulnerable space of, you know, believing or feeling something that you can't quite put a finger on. And honouring and, you know, trusting and just being in that rather than understanding. Like it's like feeling, not thinking, like that shift. And I think, particularly now, I'll get a nudge when I meet someone new or whatever, how I show up in that conversation, like my energy, those sorts of connecting the dots for me will be really important about how I perhaps like perceive them, or whether I think I want to put my time and energy into them. Like I'll listen to my intuition and stuff, and that's where the spiritual stuff comes in, rather than just what the person says. It's like all the behind the scenes stuff. Like I'm just so much more in tune, playing a bit more of a melody.
I'm doing it. That's part of it, is like finding things that add to the harmony of your frequency that you're riding on. And there's a few moments in my life, like usually at Nohomadai at the end, when you're doing your final like kind of rounds and speaking about what this experience was to you, there is a feeling of almost levitation where you just like, you don't get those moments often. And when you do get it with different people in regular settings, you're just like, that's important. I need to, wait, hold on. How do we, like that sort of, that's where we need to be, and like being able to try to, and I think it is more from you looking within and understanding yourself, because then you can hear your own frequency.
It's just listening to the quiet voice or whatever. And like noticing, like, when we're talking about things that's real grounding, I get like tingly feet these days. And I never would have used to notice that or like piece that together. And now I'm just like, that's usually just like a little clue. Like, when you can listen to the clues, and like success leaves clues. I think someone told me one time, and I like that.
No, that's really cool. And but then on the other side of that as well, it's noticing things that do the opposite. And removing yourself if you feel like that's the right thing to do.
And one of the toughest things with that, so often like with intuition and being a bit more intuitive and stuff, the hardest part is your brain kind of is playing catch up a lot of the times. Like you get those feelings or whatever, and you haven't quite thought it through and understood it yet. So it can be a bit unsettling. And I know definitely moving out of physio is something I really loved, and into my own business stuff, it was this thing of like, my gut's telling me to do this, but like logically this doesn't quite make sense. I've done this degree, I'm doing this job, everything's great. And it was, the intuition was just like a few steps ahead of that, and only a couple of months later after that it was like, okay, the dots connecting. And even like since then now dots are more in connecting, and like how I can intertwine physio with what I'm doing now and everything. But for me it's like a constant trust, and sometimes your intuition is like 12 steps ahead of my mind at that time, and I just get to lean in and like build that muscle of trusting that, because it's hard to explain to people. You can just feel it and share the energy.
I like the building that muscle, because you're thinking about, you know, the patterns that your body has. Like you don't have that neural circuiting in yourself to understand it right now, or you don't have the language, you don't know the jargon yet. Like you've moved out of something, but in essence you're still the same person. The skin, like you as a being is still there, but we're going back to the cicada, you've just shed that skin, and now you're starting to rebuild all of that in a new space. So like it'll catch up soon, but it's just understanding that in that time, like you're still you, and that we're and
honouring that. And like I think one of the only things that is consistent, certainly, like I love uncertainty, like now anyway, and that's my big driver, but having the certainty of like your values, like for me, like that is that's what I come back to most days. Some days I'll just like sit down and write my like 4 top values and be like, how much out of 10 yesterday did I play into these? Like 10 being like we're full force, 0 like hidden. And then I'll just get a real quick gauge of like check in where I'm at. That's a cool presencing thing for me too. Like particularly courage, if that's at a strong 4 out of 10, like I'm going to change something that next day. Things getting wild.
I really appreciate that, because I feel like we are so outcome driven that we judge, so like we'll go do a like it scale of how much did we do this, but it'll be like an action, like how much did I work towards this, and like how much did I, you put numbers on things because you're just like, I need to do this more, I need to do this more. But if you're not aligned with your values, or you're doing actions that don't align with who you are, and you're doing it because you think it's going to make you more successful, like it's just going to drive you more and more into a hole. But you actually coming back to even before the actions, it's like, why do we want to do those actions? Because they align with my values. So am I actually living towards my values? That's cool. That's really cool.
Start from the values, and you add more value.
But then also, what I find with people when you try to get them to journal or get them to be honest, they're either too honest and they'll say, I did nothing towards that. So like they're at that end and they don't value themselves as a good person. But then it's easy just to be like, yeah, I think I did that. How do you strike honesty with yourself?
Yeah. That's a really good question, because there's definitely been times that I haven't been and unconsciously, but I think the way that I strike honesty with myself now is like how excited I get to write the number, or how, I suppose it's just checking in with what I feel in the moment. Like if I'm distracted, if I'm looking around or whatever, it's like how focused I am and how much I'm darting between different things. Like it all comes back. I think I can only be honest with myself when I'm present with myself. And I think a lot of the time I try and be honest first and then present. But that's a big learning I've had as well, is like so much of like protecting my energy and everything in this last year has been about first focusing on my state and then focusing on, how that shows my authenticity sometimes rather than just the other way around as well. Like I think, really looking after my health and stuff has been key as well.
I mean, because in all of this, like, it's so easy just to feel like you want to keep going and just like head down doing all these things. I think I'm going all right, and you just like, oh, it's only 2 more days. Like I can give this a rest for a little bit, but then that 2 days becomes a week, and then you start going back into that whole race of trying to just get ahead again.
And habits, like how you do anything's how you do everything. I often think about that, and I'm like, if that little weird habit's showing up over there, like where else is that impacting my life? And the kind of things about not prioritising myself in certain ways, they show up everywhere, and it's confronting. So it's a work on. It's progress.
That's awesome. And now something that you've done more recently, maybe within the last month, and when people hear this will be like within the last couple of months, is you're actually hosting webinars and whatnot, talking about specific things. So like you've gotten to a point where you feel so confident to share it, or maybe more comfortable, or feeling like it's actually something that people will value as well. How long did it take you to feel like you could take the plunge into doing something like that?
Like a long time. And like in particular, like I remember at school and stuff, and even through uni, I hated public speaking. Like I was so scared. I was so scared. And then I think I took the plunge when I started to realise, one, my whole business is about trusting vulnerability, and like if I'm talking about that but not walking that walk, like what am I doing? Because that's so incongruent to me. So it was led from like I just have integrity is massive to me, and that it did feel out of integrity if I wasn't showing up in the arena, as Brene Brown says. So it was one, to get in the arena, and two, to start to realise like when I'm more vulnerable or more showing up in those like live things, I'm way more alive. Like I always have found it really hard to write and create content from a writing. Like I kind of go through a lot of conscious filters and can't really explain myself well, but speaking to things is definitely something. I always talked a lot as a kid, and I know my father would say that. But it was definitely so that I could make sure I was delivering from my most authentic place, and that is in speaking. And just from the background of being vulnerable is what makes me feel more me, and then show up in my best me. So I set up for a webinar, and I just hope for the best that something's going to come of it. And that's, I think, what definition of vulnerability is for sure. Not risking that social emotional exposure for the potential outcome rather than the potential what if.
Exactly. I mean something that you talked about, performance reviews and all that sort of stuff, but something that we've been talking a little bit more about as academics here is everyone's very silent about when they go for promotion, and it's because promotions, who actually gets promoted is made public to everyone. And you're very, like, if you tell people that you're going for promotion, you're telling them that there's a possibility that you might not get it, but everyone's going to know at the end. So what we're trying to do is make it a bit more normal around, especially within our colleagues, that, okay, if we're going to go, we'll support each other through the process, and then if at the end, it doesn't matter. We still have our jobs, we can still move on, and maybe it wasn't our time. So the more I've been seeing your stuff, I was like, it's so weird how like people come into your life at different times at like the right time. I'm like, that's so cool.
Well, I think, and I can so relate to that fear of asking, you know, for a pay review or a promotion or whatever, because you're so scared of the mirror coming back to you that you're not worth it. Well, I know that's me projecting what I feel, and I think like I would love to be able to be a stand for people on that other side of not getting that promotion, and how you can show up in your best self to, you know, receive that growth feedback, whatever, of how you could expand into that version of self that you can see for your future. Like, because I think we get so cut down by what no means to us, and I don't know, being able to hold yourself in that power of you've received a no and what now is something so important to me, because constructive feedback was something I was so scared of growing up, and only recently I've really wanted to take my mahi into that, because we're always set up with those challenging conversations, but we avoid them, and that drains us of energy. And like we avoid them until we have to, and like I don't know, I think clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And
I mean, you're given expectations and you're given like what you need to work towards, so you actually have steps to go about it, rather than just like maybe they want that, and just so much uncertainty, but you just work yourself into like this, like a mythical thing that you don't even know anything about, because you've tried to avoid all of the help that it could give you. So backwards. It's like really counterintuitive, but for us it feels like the safest way.
And it's I think it feels safe because it doesn't actually allow your creativity. And like, I don't know, I think creativity is so vulnerable, but like being able to see, you know, constructive criticism as a way to open someone's possibility up to, you know, be more than, imagine that. So you do host your first webinar. And you know, you see registration numbers as you go on, and I've talked to my musician friends about this as well, because they've organised tours and everything, and I was like, what if you organise a tour? Like, what's in the back of your mind? And they all say no one shows up. Like that's the scariest thought that they have. But like, did you ever have that cross your mind? Definitely. And I think I remember, I think it was when I did the first one, I was like, maybe first on or something, and it was only my mum there. She was so excited, and Dad, and I was like, okay. And people come, and people will always show up, and I think if no one shows up, like that's, you know, a misconception itself, because you're there, like you're showing up. So for me, I think that's always in the back of my mind, but the biggest thing is like who I get to become in the process is the gift in itself. So and then people get to experience that in some way or another, and it's all timing when people show up, and as you said, at certain times. A whole heap of the growth process for business for me has been learning how to unlearn all my expectations and instead put in structures to set me up to win. Because it's a ride. And a lot of what I've like seen from content that you've put out, as well as hearing you speak, really, a lot of it is just like you still have the same thoughts that you'd have, but you've just reframed a lot of how you'd usually think about things. So like you've just shone new light on it. So it's the same beast, but now you're just looking at it from another perspective, where you can maybe see, like you could see exit signs, or you could see more of the overall landscape. It's just more accessible,
more of the landscape. So for you, what have been I know people can go and see all of the content, but for you so far, or where you're at right now, what has been a huge reframing for you that's made you feel like, you know, something that you're carrying with you maybe more recently?
The big thing is, like, firstly, I love alliteration. Alliteration is my big thing. And I remember when I was starting to try and communicate, like, for me, what being more vulnerable looks like within conversations and stuff. I realized very quickly the way we deliver our communication is so often the fault, and it's like actually what we're saying is epic, but how we deliver it doesn't make it accessible. And it was that same thing of like the beast or whatever, it's still there but it's reframing. It's the same thing as well. Like if you tell a joke but you tell a punchline first, like who's gonna laugh, you know? It's the exact same thing. So I started to focus on like structure of comms, and I said the 3 C's, where you say a context, like where you are first, to give someone access to your reality. So that's like your emotions or whatever, and that opens the door basically. And then you create what that is. So that might be, you know, the background to why you have that emotion or how that's showing up, and evidence. And then you have the completion, which is like a request or an impact on you from someone else. But what I realize is that's a really empowering way to communicate and give someone access. But 99% of the time we flip that round. We start with a completion, we start with a request of someone. And then we like back it up with the ammunition of why they need to do this thing.
Yeah.
And then if push comes to shove, we share our emotion.
Right.
When they would have been so in our reality and that kind of more empathy if we'd started from the emotion and let them into our humanness. So that's something that I've kept and started to grow and fold into all different spaces, going through the 3 C's in the right order. Context is everything. And I think that's the part we miss in terms of how to be vulnerable is the question people ask me a lot. And I think it's just like really checking into, where you are and what your context is, and then sharing that with someone and giving them permission to be in your reality with you so that you can see the same thing going forward, basically.
Yeah. Well, the context, I mean, that will provide the reasons or the rationale for why it was followed up with this and then why it was followed up with that, because now you understand, like, this is where they're coming from. Yeah. And, like, that's, I mean, for most of what we do in academia, you usually set the context first, but we're like, obviously that's more from like a historical sort of perspective, but coming forward as the person now, and you're having to identify those different things within yourself, like that's difficult. Like, a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, can I just like give a little bit? Like, and it's the part that makes you feel like you're taking up the most space, because the part where your ego comes in really quickly, being like, well, everyone else is different to me, everyone else is separate, like I'm the only one feeling this, so why would I share it? Will show that I'm unique. Or I particularly talk to a lot of people about like speaking with bosses or pay reviews and stuff. If you were to share your context, they might change their perception of you, and that might limit your opportunities or put in jeopardy like your job or something, whatever, going forward. So there's this massive concern around that, which is entirely valid and real. And how can we create that's powerful to share your context? Like, what does that look like? Is that something that that's another thing that we get a lot of, well, not really, we actually don't get much training on it at all, but we kind of have to do as ourselves as like Pacific or Indigenous scholars. A lot of it is that we do come forward with the context first, but there are consequences for us speaking out, because it looks like, oh, you're not happy with what you've got, and that's usually the narrative that we get back, and that, we've provided all of this for you, and that just seems like you're ungrateful. So like there are huge consequences for people who want to do it, and something that you've been touching on a little bit more has been this whole idea of racism and how it is quite a systemic issue, and people don't speak up about it because one of the biggest ones is that they are scared of those consequences, and what's going to happen to me if I am the person who speaks out about it. So where did what was the injustice or that kind of drove you to that, or what kind of made you feel like that's something that you wanted to also work towards?
I think massive for me in that space has been, my own journey there. I remember particularly like at uni, I had found out about my whakapapa and being Māori within school, but I had never really known what that means or feels like to me. And at university here, they were really encouraging for me to, go on that journey, and went to my marae and everything and start that. But still applying for Māori scholarships was a massive shame spiral for me. And so I think I started to realise like I had absorbed beliefs about, myself, about why I shouldn't be getting those scholarships. And that was like my instance of like this inner conflict that I think started that story for me a bit, and a few things since, I think, has given me way more awareness of how to look at that journey, particularly taking that radical responsibility for my own bias and stuff, and then what does that look like? And I was looking at taking trusting vulnerability within that space as well. And then also I realised my knowledge is still very much blissfully ignorant within that space. So I'm doing a lot of work on like learning about that, because I think, it's a massive, as you said, systemic issue that takes so much understanding and direct, reading of all of the literature and stuff around that, and to be able to get that context. But the most important thing is to be centering people's voices with that lived experience, and that's something I've started to learn, particularly around being vulnerable. Some people are more put it into vulnerability, so often, just as you spoke to, it's like how to navigate both of them, and it's that's a really empowering space for me. And at the moment I'm feeling like I'm not almost ready to be the person as that voice, because I am going through my own journey, addressing my own biases and stuff. So it's really, and which makes me feel vulnerable. So I'm excited to where that leads to. And I think like, because it gets to a point where you don't feel like, we spoke about this way earlier, but you're just like, should I be the person to do this? But the thing is, like, we're all part of a bigger system, and like the more work we do, it's better. Most of the times, it's better than just doing nothing towards it. Like at least to be more understanding of it, or to be in a position where you want to learn about it, rather than believing that, rather than trying to force yourself to believe that it's not even a thing. Like all of this, just like that awareness of that is important. And then, from there, when you start to highlight it a little bit more, you start realizing, oh, okay, this is difficult. Yeah.
Like, if I had just not known about it, it would have been a lot easier for me, and I would have just like continued to exist.
Yeah.
But you've made it a point that this is what you want to go towards.
Yeah.
And have you found that it's like kind of more of an exciting challenge than just being a challenge?
Yeah, it's an exciting challenge, and I think the part that I feel so vulnerable being able to speak about it, knowing that imposter syndrome comes up to it. But it's a journey that I know will only follow as much as I am reconnecting with my whakapapa, my marae, and everything like that. I think that will be the outcome of that journey, and I'm like trusting that process, I suppose, to be able to guide that, because I think you can never take people places that you haven't been.
Yeah.
And so I think, I'm leaning into that, and that feels like a massive growth journey that I feel very privileged to be able to go on and look at more. But it scares the hell out of me. I feel so honoured to be able to speak about it so openly, and most importantly, I want to start how I can facilitate those conversations even within my own whānau. I think that's where everything starts, like with yourself and with close ones, and then from there. So it's I'm definitely on my own personal journey.
And that's something that we said at the very beginning was, how do we bring this to the dinner table? Has that been something that has, because you're a bit more aware, not just the racism stuff, but even just being vulnerable with family? Because I know within my own family, everything's very surface level, and we're not the type to get into that sort of like in-depth thinking. It's a very like culturally, we're in tune. And when the context is set for it, that's when it all happens. But the everyday stuff is just like, oh, how's your day? Like that sort of thing. So there's a time and a place, but like I do believe the times and places are just way too spread out, and then we end up being like it ends up being a disservice to us. So for you, how like within your everyday has it become a bit more prominent?
I think it's just become a lot more accessible. I've learned a lot about like kind of that permission-based feedback, like, I've been feeling this, is it okay to talk about this? Yeah. And I think that's the most empowering thing, because then you never know, you never think, I've talked about this thing and they didn't want to talk about that, if you've actually really got that consent. And I think that's something I've really taken from physio, is like, how do you get the consent at the start of every conversation or anything in a way that it brings both people to the table from their choice, and then speak to things. And I think I'm only, just starting, learning how to do that, like with my whānau and friends, particularly about topics that are more vulnerable to me. But it's made such an impact on how I get to show up for them, because I get to see communication as a way, I think now, of leadership, or learning what that might look like for me. I never identified as a leader growing up, and then now to be able to learn how to hold harder conversations, or even invite to harder conversations, that's where like I'm starting to feel like more of a leader. And my family have just been my best fans, like mum and dad, so supportive of my journey, which is just the biggest thing for me.
And what I love about this all is that you are documenting the process of a journey, which is just like, you have no idea where it could go. You have an idea of what it stands for. And as things come, and as you deal with them and reflect and start to putting into practice what you're actually speaking about, that's the cool part, is that like you're not just being like, oh, I saw this, I'm just going to share this. You're actually like, this is what I've been through, this is how we can do it, and now like I did it, okay, maybe that didn't work. And you're just like back and forth, and you're going through that with you, and you're documenting the process, which I really, really enjoy that.
Thank you. I think it's like I really would like to be not informative or educational, because I don't believe I'm the best person in a lot of the fields I talk to. There's so many amazing, like standing on the shoulders of giants, like there's so many amazing people in all of these fields, and like for me that particularly came up with the anti-racism stuff. But I want to be able to, how do I get to shine their voices more and be that clearing, I think, for people to have those tougher, or receive the tougher conversations, like particularly what came up for me, I know, even starting to look at what I could be sharing about, my internalized racism and all of that, and get feedback on it. I think the most thing I was feeling most vulnerable about was the feedback I could get that I'm not suitable in this space and stuff, and then I got some sort of feedback that I'd seek some advice that was like, make sure you look at like all the information you're sharing, all the stuff, and it was that constructive feedback I was most scared of. And that was the biggest aha moment of me, was I was so scared to receive any feedback, and then who I got to be in terms of brave and accepting and have grace in receiving that feedback and go forward from it. That was like the big piece of, that's what I want to give to other people. Like, how can you set yourself to be ready to receive any feedback and grow from it? Because that communication with yourself and with others is what connects you as a result of any disconnect that will inevitably happen. People make mistakes and stuff, and like that's my excited point, like being able to take and give feedback with grace and connect with people rather than get friction.
Absolutely.
That's the fun stuff. That's when my eyes light up.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, you get feedback and you're just like, haters. But like, it's really easy to get defensive. But because something that we do regularly is we submit papers to journals, people review it, and then they come back with very harsh comments, or like you read them as harsh at first, and then the more you sit with it and you take your time. So I've actually got a process now where if I get reviews, I'll like give myself 2 days to like prepare for it, and then I'll sit down and do it, because I know it's going to be someone attacking your work and someone saying, why did you do this? But what I've got in my head now is that I like read it in a nice voice, because I'm just like, instead of being like, why did you do this, it could just be like, oh, why did you do this? I'm curious. And it's
how does it get to be an access to your creativity, right? Like, how does it get to be a platform rather than a plunge?
Yeah, for sure. So for you, like now that you are, because as part of being vulnerable, it's asking for that help, and being expecting to receive feedback, and some of it not so straightforward. Some of it's not going to be like, I believe you should do this, go forth, you're great. Some of it's going to be like, have you, and then you do that.
And I'm most grateful of that stuff. Once I get my ego out of the way, that's the stuff that like is so connecting, and you like, honour the people that give it to you, because like they have to be vulnerable giving it to you. Like it's actually being able to honour that if someone's giving you critical feedback, most of the time there won't be bad intention, and most of the time they're actually being vulnerable, and like even they can sometimes struggle to deliver it, and if it doesn't land well at that moment. How can you look at it like, how are they showing up in their best version for me in this moment, because that's when you get to lean on it. That's big for me.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Oh my gosh. And now final question. So this is a question that I ask everyone, every single guest, because my hope is that we start to see there's there's plenty of tangible takeaways, but something that people see the people that they listen to doing, and then they're like, oh, okay, that's their daily thing, I could give that a go as well. What is something that you do every day or close to every day that makes you feel like you've optimized the day?
What definitely comes through is that acknowledgements thing. So for me, and actually this is great, because it's a classic, when you start feeling really good, or you start getting in good momentum with everything, your life gets full, you forget the stuff that's got you there.
Absolutely.
Sometimes. And like that was a habit I was doing every day, like all of last year. So many acknowledgements, and I haven't done it recently, but that would be my big access point, because being able to acknowledge someone every day and stop and sit with, so I'll usually be like, for example, I might be like for you, acknowledging for you for your trust and patience bringing me on this podcast. Like, I've got to have fun. The impact on me is that I feel like I'm actually adding value through the content I'm doing. Acknowledgement, easy as that, but what it does is allows me to experience how epic you are, and you actually to hear it as well, and that goes massive connection, and takes 10 seconds. And a lot of the time when I'd send an acknowledgement to people, of those 5-10 acknowledgements, they'd be like, thank you so much for doing all the time to do this, and I assume it's taken hours. It's taken 10 minutes. But it's because we're so unfamiliar with a process like that, because they always, people say like, it doesn't feel like the right time or whatever, and I'm like, I challenge you to consider, how could you make acknowledgements a daily practice that you make it the right time, so that it makes someone else's day,
for sure,
and fills up your own cup at the same time, and helps you be so much more articulate with like actually how people have honoured and valued you, and like added value to you, and that's something that fills up my kind of contribution cup every morning. That's awesome. Fills up someone else's connection cup. So
as soon as I heard you, because I think you did a post on it, and as soon as I heard that one, I was just like, I'm going to do that. I should probably start doing it. I started really small by just like acknowledging people that are in my life, like just letting them know. It's like I see these people every day. They do awesome, really cool things, but it's just like hi, and then with ships passing in the night. But like we're doing cool stuff all the time, but we just have so much humility, I guess, or we don't want to bring it up. And then on the other side, do you celebrate yourself?
So after I've done acknowledgements and seeing people like loving it, I was like, why wouldn't I do them to myself? So I do tend to myself each day too often, which is fun. And me and my flatmates started doing that with each other as well. So I do. But one of the things that I realised was a speed bumps really quickly. When you go to acknowledge someone, for me anyway, you say the thing, you say like, I acknowledge you're so brave doing this or whatever, and you don't give them evidence, like you don't give them the cold hard facts. That's what we skip out, and I think that is something that I definitely recommend, is like try and include one thing where they've directly shown that, because otherwise it's so hard for them to absorb, because they're like, she's just saying that. But as soon as there's a real life thing, and then there's the impact it's had on you after that, like that's what it lands for people, and they just get to sit and absorb it in. But otherwise it's so easy, because we're so used to just like deflecting. So that would be the thing. saying, let it sink with them by giving them hard facts. What have they done?
That's cool. And I think, and then after that, as much as we don't want to talk about capitalism and all that, but if you are someone who works in an arena who wants more people, you want to give the people that work for you, you want to give them life. Like, if you want to make them feel like a valued member of this community that you've built, and like, they'll probably end up doing a lot more because they like believe in themselves and they know that they have it in you. Not for not for your gain or at all, but like because if you want to lift the morale of different people, it's letting them know that they're valued. But how are they valued? So that one thing that you highlighted as their thing, they're like, that's me.
That's what they'll remember on Sunday. Going
that's
home.
My thing.
That's my thing. And like I still remember things from even going through school of like one comment a teacher's made to me or whatever that stuck with me. So you never know how long that would stick with someone. And the connections it builds for going forward too. It's been crazy the amount of full circle things after I've done acknowledgements, like random other like opportunities or whatever have showed up too. But it's like making someone feel seen and valued and like they belong, like that's unlimited power for someone. Permission to be them.
Well, that's awesome. And what I really, really, really enjoyed about this entire podcast is that you are such a clear and eloquent speaker. I do read a lot of stuff, but I watch videos. Like, that's just the way that I am. So what I would do was I just like go through your stuff and just like play it and like walk and listen to it. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's cool. So like it's really cool to have you on for an entire hour where we can see. And another place where people can see you for an entire hour is you're probably looking at doing some stuff in the near future. We're gonna take a bit of break.
No, we're going full Monty now. Yeah, it was just fun, and I think epic with COVID that we're starting to get some live events happening, which is really cool. I'm probably going to be doing some more webinars because like they're just fun. That's like my way to get in the arena. And I think Instagram, and LinkedIn, all that stuff is my thing. I mean, watch this space for a podcast. I wouldn't be far off.
That would be awesome.
But particularly I'll be creating webinars just to bring people's voice together, basically.
Because of your content, like I love it all, but the ones where you speak, they're so awesome. They're really, really cool because you know who you are. When you say like trusting vulnerability, and then it's like all these like people are writing stuff and like they're being vulnerable, but it's like you're still hiding behind like a post that you've put up, which is just a picture of something else that's not you. But when you speak, like I've got everything about you. I've got your inflection. I've got the way that you say and like all of it's there. You're there. You're showing up,
and you get to bring your humour to it. That is something I forget. Like I forget as well. Like humour is a lot, and you're vulnerable with humour, but I think that is something I definitely want to bring my kind of creativity and like. I'm kind of funny, I reckon. If I put that more to my work, I think things could be a whole lot more light as well, because I really want to bring lightness to vulnerability as well. So, watch the space for that as well. Might be some jokes. I don't know.
But even just like being able to laugh as well. Not taking it so seriously all the time.
Just breathing and giggling. I think that's what it's all about.
Let's go through it. Bridge, this has been absolutely awesome. Like there's so much that we could talk about, but I think like if you come back and forth a little bit more, I think we'd just make this almost a bit more regular. So this is awesome. Thank you so much for your time over
this is so fun.
Really looking forward to seeing what else you come out with.
The journey going from physio to trusting.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you very much.
This is fun.